Hey everyone, it's Ivan, KidBadger.com, here with another episode of our Firearms Ownership series. And today we're going to go over how to load and unload your rifle. Well, there are a ton of different rifles out there. One of the more popular ones here in the States is AR-15 or some variant thereof. Even if your gun does not look exactly like this, we're going to go off concepts and principles. So with respect to this, before we get into loading, we want to unload it. Why is that important? Well, we want to verify the condition of this rifle. So if I just pulled this out of a safe, a gun case, whatever it may be, I don't know if it's loaded or unloaded. So I want to verify, in fact, it is unloaded. Pretty simple. We're going to go through it right now. First thing we need to do is remove the source of feed. So on these rifles, on the right-hand side of your low receiver, right here is your magazine release. We're going to depress that, remove our source of feed, take that magazine out. Is it unloaded now? Still an unknown. Reason being is this ejection port cover is closed, and behind it, the bolt might be forward, might be back, I don't know, could be around in the chamber. So we need to continue with unloading it. On the left side of our rifle, we have our bolt catch, bolt release, little ping pong paddle looking thing. And what we're gonna wanna do is we're gonna wanna put pressure towards our lower receiver, probably with our thumb of our, I guess, support hand, we'll call it. We're gonna put pressure there. Then we're going to unlatch our charging handle and we're gonna pull this till it won't go any further. At that point, it is locked back. I can then let go of everything. This is maintaining pressure, having locked back our bolt carrier group. And this, I'm gonna go ahead and slide forward and latch it, at which point I can then inspect my weapon. I can look in here, make sure there is in fact nothing inside the magazine well. I can then look onto the feed ramps, which are gonna be right in here. And then if I want, I can go ahead and physically and visually inspect the chamber, make sure I do not have a round in there. At that point, I've verified this rifle is in fact unloaded. I'm gonna go ahead and load up this magazine with some of these inert dummy rounds. As far as our magazine goes, we have our magazine body at the bottom, we have our base plate up top, we have the follower, which follows the rounds that we're loading in. There's a spring inside there. And these pieces right here are the feed lips. To load rifle magazines like this, we're going to take one of our rounds, make sure that basically it is roughly looking the same. We have the shape on our follower. We want the round to be more or less be looking the same, i.e. pointing in the same direction. We're going to put it over the top of the feed lips, press it straight down. Next one, going to put it on top, press it straight down. Occasionally, you may need to tap and make sure the rounds are seated back towards the back of the magazine. Otherwise, what can happen is if you put them in kind of in the middle, you end up with something like that. One, it won't feed into the magazine well of your rifle. And in addition to that, you can't really get other rounds back on top of that. So just push them back, seat them towards the back of the magazine if need be. Now that we have our magazine loaded, we want to go ahead and get this loaded. A few things to be aware of. One, when we are manipulating our rifle, hold it like you own it. You don't need to be ginger with this thing. We want to actually hold it and have a good firm grip with our firing hand. Fingers straighten off the trigger. Back to those fundamental safety rules. The only way this will go off is if you manipulate it off safe and either your finger or some other object manipulates that trigger when this is loaded. It's the only way it's going to fire. So we're not going to be cavalier about it, but you don't need to baby this. Like, hold it. You're in charge. Be in charge. So where do I want to hold this in space? I could manipulate this out here. I'll be honest, it's already getting heavy. This thing's less than 6 pounds, but it'll get heavy really fast out there. So with respect to economy of motion and just being able to do something the best way, best practice, we're going to bring it in here, have the stock come down, our elbow kind of make contact with the bottom of our ribs, which is honestly the same space that I would manipulate, reload, do whatever I'm going to do with a pistol. So now we have something that translates across both platforms, rifle or pistol. at this point, I need to insert my source of ammunition, being my magazine. I can index it, bullets facing towards the front of the magazine by my index finger. I'm gonna put it into the magazine well, push it forward until I hear it click. I'm gonna pull down. I have time and opportunity, and I wanna make sure that is seated so that when I start doing my other manipulations, this thing doesn't fall out and now I'm back at square one. Now that the magazine is inserted, a couple different ways I can approach this depending on how this weapon is set up, i.e. right now, the bolt carrier is locked to the rear. I can see that because it is in fact locked to the rear. In which case, while I can manipulate the charging handle, it doesn't really make as much sense as using the bolt release. So this little ping pong paddle right here, bolt catch, pushing down on the bottom of it, bolt release, pushing on the top of it. What will happen is when I push that towards the receivers, it will send the bolt forward. So push it forward, and it is now sent the bolt forward. It is stripped around off that magazine, up the feed ramps, and into the chamber of the barrel. If the bolt carrier of our rifle is forward, we can no longer use that bolt release. So we need to manipulate this differently. One thing that can happen is if your magazine is loaded to capacity and the bolt carrier is forward, it can be difficult to get the magazine to seat. You may or may not need to kind of tap it with the heel of your hand to make sure it is in fact seated, confirm it's seated, and now we need to manually manipulate the bolt all the way back and let it go forward. We do that with our charging handle. Best practice is we do not want to come over with both fingers like this. Reason being is it's really easy to accidentally ride the bolt forward, in which case you can end up inducing a malfunction. So what we want to do is keeping it anchored, kind of buttstock up against our ribs so that we have something to pull against. We just simply grab the latch with our support hand and that charging handle, pull it all the way back, at which case we let go. Under its own spring tension inside this buffer tube, it sends the bolt carrier forward, strips that round, up the feed ramps, into the chamber, and now we have a loaded rifle. At this point, is our rifle loaded? Probably. What do I mean? Well, it probably stripped a round off of our magazine and fed it into the chamber. How do we know definitively? Well, there's a couple different ways. One is best practice. The other is the other way that you can go about it. We'll start with best practice. Before we insert our magazine, we can look as well as feel and see which side the round is feeding off of. These being staggered magazines, it's either going to feed off the left side or off the right side. Then, once we insert our magazine, make sure it's seated, and charge it, i.e. pull the bolt to the rear and release it. If I take the magazine out and I look and feel, it's now feeding off the right side, where it was feeding off the left side. And since nothing fell out, physics tells me it stripped that round that was on the left side into the chamber, and this is in fact, at this point, loaded. For a press check, we're trying to inspect the chamber to see if we had actually stripped a round off in there. So the way we're going to do that is we are going to manipulate the charging handle slightly to the rear until we can look and we can see brass. In this case, it's black plastic. Also, you can actually feel in there with either your thumb or forefinger, especially if it's dark out and you don't have the light to see, at which point we're going to let go. What we don't want to do is gingerly let this go forward, or you will induce a malfunction. At that point, if your rifle is so equipped with this, which is a forward assist, we can press that. What it does is there are notches along here on your bolt carrier group, and this grabs them and pushes them forward, making sure that your bolt carrier is actually seated so that it is in battery. So when in fact you end up taking this off safe and pulling the trigger, it will fire. Now that I've verified this is in fact loaded, maybe I want to unload it again. I'm going to, over on the right side of the lower receiver, depress the magazine release, remove the source of ammunition, take that out, stow that, and now Over on the left side, little ping pong paddle, the bolt catch bolt release, I'm gonna push on the bottom, and while I'm putting pressure on that, I'm gonna come over and I'm going to manipulate the charging handle all the way to the rear. At which point, whatever was in there will ideally come out. I can then let go of my pressure here and go ahead, push this all the way up till it's latched. Now I can inspect it, make sure there is nothing in the magazine well, anything on the feed ramp, and visually, physically inspect chamber, verifying once again this is in fact unloaded. We now hopefully have a working understanding of how to load and unload our rifle, as well as load our magazine. I would encourage you to practice, not necessarily with live ammunition. Go get some dummy rounds. There'll be a link down below to where you can find some. These right here are made by Magpul. They're just plastic, inert. Other ones, snap caps, things along those lines, they allow you to get repetitions of loading your magazines, to include loading and unloading your rifle safely without having to actually have any live ammunition. Save that for the range, but hopefully this has been helpful, and yeah, join me next time as we continue the journey. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.